Hi, and welcome to Studio 411. I'm your host, Larry Dasilva, and we've got a extra special show for you today. We have a gentleman who, a Connecticut native, who has done such wonderful things in his life and is still active, probably more than most of us put together these days. We have musician and author Donn Trenner joining us. He's written a book in the last year called Leave It to Me, My Life in Music, co-authored with Tim Atherton, published by Bear Manor Media. And let me bring this up too. We'll start, we have a treasure trove of memorabilia. I think he's our first Emmy nominated person. National Academy of Television and Arts honors Donn Trenner, conductor Cy Coleman, arranger. They were nominated in 1976 for Outstanding Achievement in Music Direction for Gypsy in My Soul, and that was with the great Shirley MacLaine. And speaking of great, we welcome to Studio 411 Mr. Donn Trenner. How are you, sir? Good to have you here. Now, tell me, I was wondering, as only I would, what hospital were you born? Because if you grew up in Hamden, I would think either
New Haven.
New Haven, yeah. Mm-hmm. And in those days, there were, well, not that you would remember, but there would be.
Well, I was born at a very young age.
Yes. Now I understand why, reading the book, so very few people had any altercations with you, because your wit is quite amazing.
I take probably more chances with that than I should, but I've been around so many comics, so many comedians, because they were almost always an opening act for many of the performers that I worked with, you know.
Now, speaking of comics, and I wasn't going to go down this road, but you talk about a few in your book. Again, the book is a tremendous cavalcade of not only Donn's life, but the people that he's dealt with and encountered and worked with in the music industry. You mentioned a few. I was going to ask this delicately later on in the show, maybe. Name three people that perhaps were not the nicest of people, but I'll save you the trouble. I would say ones that stood out to me, like Milton Berle, Jack Carter. There were a couple of others.
You got two good ones
that really, they were, I know Berle, because I know from when he hosted Saturday Night Live back some 40 years ago. That is the only episode that they never repeat, because Lorne Michaels was at his wit's end.
The problem with Milton was that he was early in television, and he knew an awful lot about television. Right. And then he tried to tell everybody else how to do everything. And it was not necessary, because they knew how to do it, you know.
And Jack Carter was, again, another Borscht Belt-like comedian. Didn't go back as far as Milton, but again, just a lot of insecurities, which is common in comics. But,
I think all of that is insecurity. Yeah. I think all of them are trying to be better than they are. And, you know, I think that shows up.
Sure. Now, talk a little bit about your co-author, Tim Atherton. Again, how did the idea, or who said to whom, hey, let's put a book together?
Well, I'll tell you as quickly as I can. When I first came back to Connecticut after living in California, this is my 21st year back here now. I was basically in the Los Angeles area in the studios, except for doing a lot of traveling. And when I came back here, not knowing what I was going to do, I became involved with the Mohegan Sun as a contractor. What is a contractor? The Mohegan Sun signs a contract with Frank Sinatra Jr. In the contract, it says that the buyer, which is the Mohegan Sun, must supply a 46-piece orchestra. He comes in with 5 or 6, and then it's a Donn Trenner orchestra. So I hire all the musicians.
Gotcha, okay.
And one of the musicians that I hired was Tim Atherton. He's a professor of music at Dartmouth and also at Westlake. And he was a trombone player that I hired. And when we would do those shows at the Mohegan Sun, we would rehearse usually from 2 to 5 in the afternoon and take a break for 2 hours and go to the employees' cafeteria, have dinner. And after I came back here, some of the musicians knew who I was from California, and he sat with me a lot, and I got a letter from him. Very impressive. He sent me a letter that was grammatically perfect. That doesn't happen very often. In the letter...
Letters don't happen.
In the letter, he said, I believe that you have a moral responsibility to share the diversity of your career with the world. And he says, I'm willing to give up a year of my professorship, which he did not do. But he came to my house so many times with a tape recorder. And we put the whole thing together. And he'd take it home, and his wife would transcribe it. And then they would send me 100 pages, and I couldn't read them. I thought it was the most ridiculously egotistical project. I'm not like that, and I just couldn't read about myself. So it probably took almost 11 years before we finally got it out. And Tim became very angry with me because he put so much time and research into it, you know. But here it is, it's out now, and I'm kind of happy about it. It's changed my life a lot.
And I hear from your lovely publicist, Liz, who has been very helpful to me in getting you on here.
She's been amazing.
As well as the folks at Bear Manor Media, when we could get them on the phone, that you know, everyone is already clamoring for you to do another book. So that's hopefully that will happen.
That's true.
And now is Tim going to sign up for another 11 years?
Liz came up with an idea. She comes over to the house and in research looking for things, and I, believe it or not, I still have a Rolodex.
Sure.
And every once in a while I look in that for someone's name, and I see all these names. I've got Oscar Peterson, Dizzy Gillespie, Shirley MacLaine, I've got all these names. So Liz suggested that we call the book The Rolodex.
Nice, there we go. See, when I heard that, I'm thinking, and this was before I delved into the book, and then afterwards, I'm like, oh, there's no doubt. I mean, there's just so much, you know, and you do go into, you know, quick detail, but not too quick that the reader feels like that, oh, well, what did I miss or whatever about each person. You talk about their highs, their lows, and that's good because a lot of people sugarcoat, oh, everybody was great, everybody was great. And you know what, that's life is not like that. You know?
I know that.
Yeah. Now, you grew up born in Connecticut, in New Haven, as the records would show, because just like me, you were born in Bridgeport. Why? Because it was the only hospitals were in the major cities. Spent your early years in Hamden. Your parents built a home. Now, when they had a home built, or they built it themselves?
They didn't physically build it, but that's the term when they design and hire somebody to build. It was on Carlton Street in Whitneyville.
Okay, yeah.
It was right behind the Brock Hall Dairy.
Wow.
I heard the cows in the morning.
Oh, there you go. Free milk. And then during the Depression, I'm going to say about what, early to mid 30s, then you moved, financially things became a little tough for your parents, and you moved to New Haven.
Right.
What part of I lived in New Haven at one point, down off of Congress Avenue. Where did you
I remember
grow up?
Congress Avenue.
Yeah, near Yale.
My dad managed a store on the corner of George and Church Street called the People's Clothing Company.
There you go.
My dad managed that, you know.
Yeah.
And we lived on Eld Street, and then finally out to Morris Cove on Townsend Avenue.
And then, you know, educate us as we go along, because I find this fascinating when we can have someone who, you know, can remember certain things about certain areas. In this case, you know, Greater Connecticut. Trolleys, I mean, I remember seeing a still that trolleys after, 1948 or whatever, were discontinued. Why, I have no idea. I can remember as a kid in Bridgeport still seeing the trolley tracks still in the ground before they were eventually
I used the trolleys a lot.
Yeah.
So did my parents. Neither one of my parents ever drove a car.
Yeah.
There was never an automobile in my family until the minute I turned 16
Right,
years
and then
old.
because you were kind of an entrepreneurial guy,
Yeah.
which I got the impression, I don't know if I think he was probably enviously impressed or proud of you, but I almost got the impression, was your dad kind of, you know, was he almost a little envious that you were like so successful? Because your dad kind of struggled in his life.
I think probably he couldn't understand. More than anything, though, it would bother me when I came back here because I'd see him talking to people. And I know that, like a dad, he was raving about me, and I'd get embarrassed. You know?
Yeah, no, but I mean, that was great. I mean, it seemed like you were just like a master of, you know, kind of just coming up with, whether it's, I don't think you were ever a newspaper boy, but you sold subscriptions, didn't you, at one point?
Yes, I tried. You've read a lot, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I try to read the book.
Saturday Evening Post, Ladies' Home Journal.
Wow. And then other things to raise money. So yeah, when you turned 16, not only the first car, but I believe, what make and model was it? Do you remember?
1936 Ford Phaeton.
Wow.
Yeah.
If we open up this curtain, here's a car. No, we don't. Unfortunately, we couldn't resurrect it.
That's right.
It's probably in the great scrap heap in the sky. But
I'm sure. Yeah.
But no, that's phenomenal. Now, another thing that was amazing to me, because again, these, you don't have this luxury. This is what comes with wisdom and age, whether we like it or not, is that you actually either that morning or the day before saw the Hindenburg pass over either Hamden, New Haven area on the very day that it eventually crashed in Lakeside, New Jersey.
I was staying at my grandmother's house overnight on Orange Street, corner of Orange and Edward, if that helps you any.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And it went by, I think, very late at night, on its way to its disaster.
Amazing, yeah. And
Yeah.
even the call is like, I mean, you talk about sports calls and things. I mean, not that that's a sports call, but I mean, the gentleman, the humanity. I mean, it's just like it stays. Anybody who hears that, I don't know how anybody could forget
amazing,
that.
yeah.
Amazing. And the old newsreels, folks, in those days.
Yeah.
We'll digress a little because we'll try to catch some of these. You're somewhere in there. I think I see you behind your. Was that your eventual
yes.
first wife, Helen
That's
Carr?
my first wife.
And that, tell us the musicians there. Isn't that?
That's Chet Baker,
Yeah.
Harry Babison, and Charlie Parker.
Charlie Parker on the left, yes, sir.
One of the geniuses of music.
Yeah, yeah. And I've told many of folks as we got ready to do this episode about you don't find too many people around who know Mingus and Charlie Parker and so many Stan Getz and so many of these other folks. Amazing. Your dad, going back to what we talked about with your entrepreneurship and heads up, nicknamed you Persistent Jim. I'm not sure. Was that an old saying back in the day?
It relates to the economy in
Yeah.
my family. If I wanted something and I asked my dad gently if he could get it for me, and he didn't get it for me, and I would remind him that I needed it or wanted it, he'd say, "Oh, Persistent Jim." It was just a throwaway, but I remember that,
Now you were an only child, and again,
Yes.
so am I. Not unless there were others, and no one wants to admit to it. I don't know. But
Well, there's a set of advantages and disadvantages.
yes,
you
but
know.
tell me how your parents' relationship, I found it fascinating, affected you more in your adult life. In other words, I get a correlation that did any of what happened or things that maybe didn't happen affected how you in your relationships throughout your life?
Oh, absolutely.
Because again,
Absolutely. I've been married more than once, which I'm not proud of because I didn't expect to be or want to be. And I think that probably I was a failure in the relationships because it's not a difficult word for a lot of people to pronounce, but I never knew how to say no.
Right.
So you become over-acquiescent and you do everything you can to please somebody. And that doesn't work in a relationship,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, you call it in the book, and again, I've heard the term before, an enabler, basically. Is what-
Absolutely.
Yeah. And do you find that
I'm still that way.
you're still there? But
I see.
if you don't mind me asking, at this point, you're not married, correct?
No.
No. Okay.
But I'm very close to my former wife. Now she's
yes,
my girlfriend.
BJ,
but she's the
correct,
mother of my daughter.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. No, Carmen.
Carmen,
yes,
that's
yes,
right.
But you're also
Carmen's a wonderful lady, really.
Yeah, and now BJ is still with us, correct?
BJ is now married to Gordon Hunt, who is Helen Hunt's father.
Oh, okay. There you
And
go.
Gordon and I have written music together. In fact, he wrote a lyric for Helen Hunt's 30th birthday, and we surprised her. I wrote the music for it, and I went over to their house, and he asked Helen to come over, and she didn't want, what's he bothering me for on my birthday? And George Hearn, a well-known actor who did La Cage aux Folles, I think,
Oh,
who
yes.
was a good singer.
Broadway,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So he was there, and Helen came in, and we sang and played the song for her.
Nice. There you go. No, I remember
a
seeing her
lovely
name
man,
listed, but I didn't
yeah.
get the connection. So
He's a very, very nice man, and BJ is very
So
important to me.
BJ, Helen Hunt's stepmother. See the
Yeah.
things we learn
Yeah.
here on Studio
Yeah.
411. Donn Trenner joining us for the hour. Leave It to Me, My Life in Music. Bear Manor Media, DonnTrenner.com for more information. Perfect pitch and photographic memory. Apparently, no, you will not block out this interview when you leave here. Is that true?
No, I'll remember everything you
Oh
said.
my goodness. Okay. Uh-oh. Help me, Liz. And perfect pitch. Now, is it true Judy Collins has perfect pitch?
I think I've heard that. I don't know.
Is it true Raquel Welch does not?
It's definitely true.
Oh my goodness!
That's
One of the tidbits in the book. My
Yeah.
goodness, yeah. And
I'm a little nervous about Raquel
wow,
right now.
Yeah. Now, going back to your early teens, mid-teens, of course, New Haven, I think more so in those days. Please correct me if you disagree. The Schubert Theater was like a real mecca for for entertainment in those days. That was where so many future Broadway shows came through. Whatever.
Absolutely.
It was a different way of kind of breaking
right.
things in. So you really, your mom used to take you there a lot. So
Well, on Sundays too, they used to bring what we called name bands in when the orchestras were really happening, and I did 3 different things in that theater. I was an usher, I played in the pit band, and I came in and played on stage too.
Wow, amazing. And then your mom, which again, no, the New Haven, the Schubert, that was what, 1 or 2 trolleys to get there?
Just one.
Just one, yeah. Amazing. And the
That's
trolleys.
right, 2 trolleys you got to transfer, didn't you?
Yes, yeah. Indeed. And then your mom later on, again, this must have been a heck of an undertaking. You guys would go then to Harlem, and then later on, then on your own or with friends, then you spent a lot of time at the Apollo checking out the musicians of the day.
Well, not at that point in my life. The Apollo came into my life later.
Later on, yeah.
It came into my life 3 days after Martin Luther King's assassination. That was really something. I was there with Nancy Wilson.
But I'm saying, didn't your mom also take you to New York?
Oh, to New York, yes.
Yeah. And then where did you?
In fact, she took me once to a club called the Zanzibar, where Duke Ellington was playing, and that was the first time I saw him. And I remember being in a nightclub when I was like 15 years old, and it was really exciting because there was a panel in the ceiling that you couldn't see, and the orchestra was on stage, and all of a sudden this big circular panel came down from the ceiling, and on it was the piano and Duke Ellington.
Wow. Is that,
I
know
that.
they've renovated the theater because, again, it fell into disrepair, but is the theater still as nice? I have not had the
I don't know if it's there at all. I think it was a nightclub more than anything.
Oh, at the Zanzibar, though.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
no, I was going to say the Apollo's been renovated. Zanzibar, unfortunately, has faded, I'm sure, from view. Tell me about seeing Billie Holiday perform back, mid 40s, late 40s? Mm-hmm. And what?
I had a mixed interracial band at a place called the New Orleans Swing Club in San Francisco. And Billie Holiday came in as a guest performer, and she was there for a couple of weeks. So we played for her. I don't remember playing for her. I think she had her own pianist, but my band played for her.
Right. And what did you think of her? I mean, people still to this day rave about her. I mean, obviously there were so many to choose from.Ella, Lena, obviously most people that know music would know those folks just by their first name. But were you like
She was a serious stylist.
Yeah.
She was different.
Yeah.
Her delivery of speech was different. So her delivery of lyric was different, Ella, of course, as far as I'm concerned, is the champ.
Yeah.
And I worked with Lena Horne, too.
Sure. Did you find that as Ella got older that her style even improved as opposed to those early, Tisket to Tasket, that phase where they were just pumping out those, those
natural musician.
Yeah.
Amazing.
At 18, you joined the Ted Fiorito Band, making $85 a week.
17 I was when I joined it.
Oh, 17. Oh, okay. So that's still good money for that time.
Yes, it was.
And now tell me, the 40s, as opposed to the 30s, whatever, but the 40s, maybe because of the war years, whatever, was really musically happening. I mean, there was just so much going on there. I mean,
there were so many good orchestras.
Yeah.
There really were.
I mean, I can remember even when I lived about 30 years ago in Old Lyme, there's a road that, and I'm blanking on the name, we lived for about a year or two, one street over, it's not there anymore, but there was a building, and they said, oh, back in the 40s and 50s, every big name band used to come through there and play and stuff. And of course, now you look at it and you say, you know, you marvel at how that could happen.
Oh, sure.
But what happened? Why, when the war ended, in your opinion, did then, you know, the music seemed to kind of start to go out of favor, and then a lot of musicians got into bebop?
Not that early. Not that, well, bebop started
Yeah.
in that period, you know. I graduated from high school when I was 19, in 1944, and I was 17, and I went away on a summer job down to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I drove my Ford Phaeton down
There you
there.
go.
I don't know how much longer it lasted, but it got me there anyway. And I remember being appalled by something that has seriously affected me. It's hard for me to talk about it, but I will, because I feel it's necessary. We live in this situation right now. I remember driving down to Myrtle Beach in my car, and I got to Washington, D.C., and I pulled into a service station to get gas, and I saw 3 restrooms and 2 water fountains. And I was seriously affected by that.
And
it's
clearly
never
marked too,
changed.
yeah, you know.
You know, and I don't need to say any more, because I'm sure everybody will know what I'm talking about, you know.
Yeah, a lot of
It
segregation.
really affected
yeah,
me badly, because I remember when I went to school, my mother said to me, any one of your friends is welcome here. I don't care if they're green and white striped, as long as they're a good person. And that's how I've lived.
Sure,
You know?
absolutely. Let's see. At 18, we talked about you joined your first professional band. Your first band was in 1943. Your own band, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, with a bunch of musicians
Yeah.
local here. Tell me a little. It was a funny story about Carl Doc Severinsen, who is, as we tape, is still with us. Former band leader of the Tonight Show during the latter half of Johnny Carson's years there. I understand that. I don't know the last time you saw him, but I understand if you mentioned a certain name that he would know it was you pulling a prank on him.
Oh, gee, let's not go into that. That was not nice.
No, okay. But
the
needless to
story
say, he
about-
knows you well.
Oh,
yeah. So the story's in this book here.
Yeah, in
Leave
the
It to
book.
Me, My Life in Music by Donn Trenner and Tim Atherton, Carl Doc Severinsen. Things I didn't know, Henry Mancini, must have been brief, was a member of the Glenn Miller Band, correct?
Tex Beneke.
Tex Benny. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
post after Glenn
I got a
was
call
shot
to
down.
join that orchestra in Auburndale, Massachusetts, at a place called the Totem Pole, where what we called name bands played at frequently. So I went up. I guess they were auditioning me to see if I would join the band, because their piano player was leaving, and it was Henry Mancini. He was leaving to get married.
I was never aware that he had been with another band.
Yeah.
I mean, I just knew him from from Peter Gunn on.
Oh, he's
So I mean,
an
yeah,
amazing addition to the musical world.
we have so much to cover in a short time. Just give me a couple of one sentence things about some of these folks. George Shearing.
George Shearing. I received a call when I lived in San Francisco. I was there with Helen, my first wife, which is where she was from. And a man opened a nightclub there and brought George Shearing over from England. So I think it was his first engagement here. And somebody called me and said, we would like you to be what we now call the opening act. We would like you to play intermissions for him. So I went down to the club and I played. I'd sit up on the stage and play the piano that he was going to play. And no matter where I looked, I would see him. And I would really get nervous. Of course, he couldn't see me because he's blind.
Right, yeah.
And with his wonderful, wonderful English accent, he would introduce me. And he would say, now, ladies and gentlemen, the 12 magic fingers of Donn Trenner.
There you go. And
I thought that was
stuck.
really
There you
funny.
go. Oh, that reminds me about things sticking. There's a thing here in the.
I'm impressed, Larry. You've read my book.
Absolutely,
Boy,
yes.
oh boy,
All
do
10
you-
pages, yeah. There's a piece of sheet music that obviously the title of the book, Leave It to Me. And then when I first saw it, and I said, oh, what an interesting name. I said, it reminds me of somebody that I remember watching as a kid growing up. And I said, oh, no, it can't be. Dick Gautier is
Gautier,
the actor, comedian.
That's right.
I didn't know he was a lyricist.
I didn't either.
Jaime on Get Smart, among other things. Yeah,
That's
amazing.
right. I'm surprised you remember that.
No,
That's absolutely right.
Who was his wife? Was he married
I
to
don't
somebody
remember. I
well-known?
didn't know him that well, but somehow we became involved, and he offered to write a lyric for this song,
Amazing,
Leave It to Me. Yeah.
amazing. I knew of him
I'm so
as
glad you talked about that.
Yeah, well, when I saw it, I said, well, there's where the title for the book came, Leave It to Me, because obviously, to go back to what you said about my words, not yours, maybe perhaps feeling sometimes you coddle, the wives or whatever, but in terms of performers with their egos, I'd like to be coddled too, but again, my executive producer just tells me that her job is just to say, shut up and no, and that's about it. So anyway, but in your case, it would it served you well because I think you had a calming influence on so many of these people because you would know better than I. Performers are sometimes neurotic, sometimes.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Boy, are they ever, Well, we won't go into which ones are which.
On
but,
that note, okay, who do I have a picture of? No, no, not at all. Oh, I will say someone who I'm sure is not neurotic, but again, a wonderful thing that your publicist assistant, Liz, I have to mention this. We can get a tight shot on this. This is a little whatever kind of oil or charcoal,
it's
whatever.
A pencil sketch.
Pencil sketch by, it's listed as Benedetto, but this is a photo of Donn Trenner, and this is done by the great Tony Bennett. So that is not a great photo. Look at that.
He did it in about 10 minutes. We were sitting as close as you and I are now.
It's beautiful. That's a great shot. And speaking of shots, well, we had it there. We'll get it back later. The image of you conducting the Hartford Jazz Orchestra, which I'd be remiss if I didn't mention. Since 2000, Donn has been traveling, every Monday night, I believe, to where do you guys perform?
The Arch Street Tavern.
Okay, I've been there. So now I know.
It's a wonderful orchestra. I inherited it.
Nice, yeah.
It's an orchestra that was started 50 years ago by Charles Cicchetti.
Yeah.
He was musical director for Sergio Franchi, played trombone in the Hartford Symphony, and also was a pianist. I never heard him play piano. I did, however, hear him play trombone.
Nice.
And he was so far ahead of his time. The essence of that orchestra is what he wrote in arrangements. They're ageless.
Well, when he was younger, wasn't he with some famous band? Because that's where I knew the name. I thought he was
I'm not
with,
sure.
Yeah, I thought he was with like one of the big bands.
I didn't know him very long. I did do one thing, and I'm really happy about it. I arranged for him to do an engagement at the Mohegan Sun. And it was on April 8th, I think, of how many years ago it was. And a week later, he was gone. It was the last thing he did.
There you go.
And we did a live album there,
Nice. Another nickname of yours. You seem to acquire nicknames, and they're not even from the wives. So I don't know. I guess these are good nicknames. But Herschel Hawkshaw, the Tune Detective. How did that? Who gave you? That's an awfully long nickname.
There was a gentleman that traveled with the orchestra, and his son now still has a music store. His name was Sal Libro, Libro. And he used to make up nicknames for guys in the band, And he heard, first of all, that I had a pretty serious chocolate habit, which I must say still exists. I went into a blood test recently, and it all came out brown.
There you go.
I like chocolate a lot, okay? And he also heard that I had perfect pitch. So he came up with that, because what would happen with that orchestra, I was very young, and I would hear something wrong in the orchestra, and I'd say, third trumpet, that's a C sharp, not a C natural.
Wow.
And so Les would look over at me anytime anything was wrong, and I just blurted that out. It wasn't really very ethical. But he called me Herschel Hawkshaw, the Tune Detective.
Nice.
Herschel being related to Hershey chocolate.
Sure.
Yeah. That's how that happened.
1954, after several years after the war, we're skipping ahead a little bit to 1961, a member of Les Brown's Band of Renown. Of course, those of you who grew up watching Bob Hope, speaking of which, Bob Hope here is a nice Christmas card to Donn from Bob and his late wife, Dolores, back in the day. Actually, I can tell you right now, 1996. How's that? It's a letter, folks. Remember those? There we go. It's a Christmas card. I still send those out to those of you who want me to send emails. Ain't happening. Okay.
Let
Anyway.
me tell you, that's a great human being. I spent a lot of time with him. I feel very blessed to have had the time that I had with him.
Sure. No, he's tremendous. I was going to say, see, you stole I said, talk about Bob Hope. Are you peeking over? There must be a mirror up here. I don't know. Tell me about pet peeves. I know one is, let's see, untuned, seemingly unplayable pianos.
I did some bad things with pianos.
Yes, I heard, you did like a Jerry Lee Lewis, or I'm trying to remember someone else that set
when
them
we were
on
playing
fire.
with the organ, I can't believe I did some of that stuff. Very often we would take the lid off of the piano so that it could be heard better from the rhythm section, drummer and bass player. And I'd find some popcorn and put it on the strings, and every once in a while I'd play a loud chord and the popcorn would go up in the air.
Nice. I'll tell you. Again, just you've been obviously in the middle of certain things in history, and also others kind of on the fringe. You talked about, of course, back in the 40s and I'm sure into the 50s and 60s, traveling throughout the country during the civil rights and racial strife that seemingly never seems to end. But then again, we thought we
that's the sadness for me.
Yeah, exactly. But other kind of perhaps more joyous, temporarily joyous. I read in the book you were at the wedding of Sammy Davis and Mae Britt, and I didn't bring that up in relation to that,
right.
but
Yes.
it did cause a scandal because, of course, Sammy was African American, Mae was a Swedish Caucasian, and that actually, if I'm sure
I still have the contract in my file at home.
Nice.
I hired it was a jazz quartet that he wanted there. I can't remember whether it was the Beverly Hills or Beverly Hilton Hotel. It was one of them.
Now there's
but the only one that didn't show up was Mae Britt.
Oh yeah. I read that. Yeah.
There was so much bad press. She just didn't come.
Amazing.
And all of the people, Sinatra and everybody was there.
You brought up early during the kind of setup before we started taping. I have if in the control room they can show this cover of this album. Double feature, B.J. Ward, who Donn met when, she was about 19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
Lovely album cover. I'm sure equally nice lady. That's Helen Hunt's stepmother, so that tells you all you need to know. Donn Trenner on piano, loves songs from the movies. Donn sat here and said, what a nice album cover. Boy, it looks even better on TV. There you go. There you go. And then she became your second wife.
That's right.
I have to ask, my Achilles heel is redheads. My first wife and my current second wife are both redheads, so that's my cross to bear.
No, I'm still waiting for a redhead.
Yeah, no,
I don't know.
I didn't realize that till my 40s.
I must tell you that sometimes it's embarrassing for me to relate to that part of my book. I'm not proud of the fact that my marriages were multi-marriages. Mm-hmm. That's not what I wanted. But there were situations and circumstances that caused it.
Sure. Oh, no, I hear you. But no, I just got concerned when I got near the end of the book and I saw the discography. And then I thought the next page was the marriages.
Liz Coburn is responsible for that discography.
Oh, not the marriages,
Absolutely.
The discography. Okay, yeah. We can't blame you for the other ones, Liz. But tell me a little bit about Betty Jo. Is that BJ? Is that her given name?
Oh,
Betty
no,
Jo,
that's really funny. It's Betty Jean.
Oh, so
it's Betty Jean.
So she's not
From
one
Wilmington,
of the Petticoat
Delaware,
Junction girls. Okay.
Right. I met her on a show that I did after the Steve Allen show finished. I went to New York and became musical director. I had the orchestra on a show called ABC Nightlife. Mm-hmm. William B. Williams was the co-host.
Yeah,
and we had a
WNEW for many years.
Remember him?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We had a rotating guest each week, and the first one was Shelley Berman. And BJ was Shelley Berman's guest.
Yeah. Nice.
Anyhow, people ask her what her name stood for, BJ, and she would say, basically Jewish.
No.
She was very funny.
She was the one that someone asked for the arrangements, or was that someone else? And she basically had
that was me.
She had a crumpled piece of paper.
That was it. That was it. And after the show, I said to her, so cute, I said, can I have the 7 magic numbers? And she said, what do you mean? I said, your phone number.
There you go.
So I started to date her, and she invited me over to her apartment in New York, and she had a piano there. And I said, oh, do you play piano? And she said, yes, I do a little bit. I said, could you play something for me? She said, yes. She said, I'll play the second page of Rhapsody in Blue. And I said, what happened to the first page? She said, I never learned that. She's an incredibly funny, incredibly talented girl. And one of the joys of doing that album that you talked about with her is the fact that it's just piano and voice. And one of the things I like to do more than anything, as much as I like conducting symphony orchestra, is accompanying a good singer.
Yeah, and that's what we're even going to hear later on. Our mutual friend Sylvia Mims.
Sylvia Mims, who sent her regards to you as recently as 2 hours ago.
That's right. I love her the pieces. Tremendous, and she's. I keep telling her, get working on another album with Donn. I told her that right after we had her on the show last year.
She's remarkable.
Some other folks. Mel Torme, again, always the Velvet Fog, Harry Anderson's favorite singer, on Night Court. But
great
Mel seemed like he was a bundle of nerves too.
Well, he was pretty. I remember there's a bass player. This is rather a funny story. His name was John Lydham. He was a left-handed bass player. So instead of playing this way, he played this way. He is now Jennifer Jane Lydham.
Okay.
And he's gone through, he and she have gone through the whole process, and they did a documentary on it. It's hard for me to say, she is a wonderful bass player. But one thing I always remember about
didn't give up the bass playing?
No, he's a great player.
Okay.
But one thing I remember that he said to me, he said, I was with Mel for 12 years, and he never bought dinner for us once.
Wow. Holy cow. He has a son that actually I would like to reach out to at some point, who I guess is a performer.
Yes, and I know someone that works with him, a bass player in New Haven by the name of Jeff Fuller.
There you go.
Plays with him whenever they do those dates.
And I think there's also I think Mel has a daughter, I believe, too. I'm trying to remember.
I think so, probably,
a guy, of course, best known for writing the Christmas song, Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire. But, I would see him all the time, and he was, I don't know, I just kind of always felt that he got short-shifted. You had Sinatra, you had this one, you even had like Bobby Darin, they used to call the Little Sinatra. And Mel Torme I always kind of felt didn't get the respect that he deserved.
We used to say, never became a household word.
Yeah.
And you're very bright for a young kid.
I know. It's amazing. I'm great. As I told Mother Dolores Hart, the former actress who became a nun, she was sitting right there, and I told her I'm great at cocktail parties. Absolutely. Yeah, a treasure trove of useless information.
No, it's not useless.
Well, it serves me well here.
It's working well
today. And I've learned a few. I've learned a few tips from him. What was that one with the seven? Was it 7 magic numbers?
Oh, yeah, I don't know why.
But now it'd have to be 10 because you have to include the area code now. I don't know if that would go over as well.
But it was then.
But I could go like this on the piano and just say, how about those 10 magic digits, honey? Okay, there you go. Anyway.
I don't think I ever said or thought that before. It just happened,
Getting out of that quickly. Leave It to Me. Yeah, that's true. My Life in Music by Donn Trenner, along with co-author Tim Atherton, who I did not know was a musician. Oh, my goodness. Again, so much to cover, so little time. But again, we have to move on and have to talk about this gentleman. I really was thinking I should just do a whole show about him. Things I learned which were beyond belief. Steve Allen. And I'm not even a comic. And again, so many comics that had especially the show you did in the early to mid 60s with him that, were basically, he was their mentor, without him knowing it.
That's right. He was the daddy of those late night shows. He really was.
Because Jack Parr, who was took over for the Tonight Show, wasn't really a true comedian. Carson, was, but I don't think he ever really worked at it. Steve was the raconteur. He was the I don't know if you'd call him master of anything, but he was all over the place.
You're very right.
I don't know how you could keep up with him, and that's not a shot to you. It just he was to musical direct for him. That must have been difficult. I don't know.
Well, it wasn't difficult. It was I spent a lot of time with him and Jane, and his son Steve Allen Jr. has been in my life since he was 15 years old. He was at my house 3 weeks ago.
Nice.
And he's very dear to me, and we spent a lot of time together. He once said to me, Did my dad and you have as much fun as we have together? Because we laugh constantly. Because he's a carbon copy of his dad in a way.
And he's an MD, correct?
Yes, a retired MD.
Say again.
Retired,
but still, I mean.
And his wife is a full professor. She retired this year at Cornell. And believe it or not, this is not a pun. She taught sex and abuse to women at Cornell. She talked about the abusive nature of the world, you know.
Sure.
And she just recently retired. And every summer they did a trip, a tour on an ocean liner, a summer at sea, a semester at sea. And she would teach and he would take courses.
Again, the Steve Allen show. I mean, again, I knew not so much the one you were on. I might have saw some clips towards the end of that run. Then he went to do I've Got a Secret for a number of reasons that came out or implied in your book, and I kind of dug into that, but that's for another time. But then in the late 60s, he came back with kind of a carbon copy of that show that you did, but you were already doing other things.
Yeah.
But
well,
again,
he called me, but I was in New York
you
doing
were
the other
doing,
show.
Yeah.
So we got Terry Gibbs.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Terry Gibbs, I just remember because he was interesting with the xylophone, right?
And Steve loved that
Oh,
because
yeah,
he could
yeah.
go around the back and play
Yeah.
the top part of the xylophone.
And I read even in the foreword that his son did to you. Again, even his son acknowledged. What was this thing with, not the jazz part. I understood why he really got off on having jazz musicians on his show. But what was this thing with rock and roll music? I mean, that stemmed back to the NBC days. He really, whether it was Gene Vincent, whether it was Elvis, I mean, he really went out of his way to almost make a mockery. He didn't see it that way, but it really, boy, it came out to me even
He
as
had
a
a lot
young
of
kid.
opinions.
Sure.
He was more difficult. Johnny Carson could stay right in the middle. He could take a yes and no on each side of him and never give his own opinion. Steve couldn't do that.
The interesting thing with both of them was that both of them were had very, I'll call it domineering mothers. I saw a photo of Steve from your book.
Belle Montrose.
Yeah, and she seemed very like a, forgive me, cold fish. And then Carson's mother was kind of that way too. And I think, you know, there was always a story with Carson that, you know, he wanted his mother's approval, and I wonder if the same thing with Steve.
Well, it was kind of funny with Belle Montrose because she did a show with us. We took a show to Las Vegas, and she was on the show.
Wow.
And she was funnier than Steve, and he didn't like that, you know.
There was also
Milton Berle once said that Belle Montrose was the funniest lady that he ever knew.
Wow, that's high praise. There was also another show, you talk about it in the book, and I'm blanking right now. Oh, I think it was Groucho Marx, with really kind of bothered me was that, you know, Groucho being, of course, a generation before Steve, and that he leaned over, went to you, like in other words, go to commercial or something.
Well, that's very close. You're really you may be too smart. You know that?
My wife says no.
No, you may be too smart for me, though. You know so much already. I wore a headset because to wear a headset is so you can stay in touch with the control booth and talk to the director. And Groucho was on the show one night, and I'm sitting there at the piano with the headset on, and all of a sudden I felt one piece of the headset pulled away, and Steve said, "Tell Steve," which was the name of the director.
Yeah.
"Tell Steve to get off of him."
Oh, wow.
He had enough.
What, you don't muzzle Groucho too easily, let me tell you. Oh, and we'll get back to the Steve Allen in a minute. In our remaining moments here on Studio 411, Donn Trenner joining us. We can get a shot of this. To Carmen and Donn, Love and Margaret, Radio City Music Hall, 1991. This is a Hirschfeld, and it's a heck of a image of Anne. I tell you that. You know how they say something doesn't do someone justice? Well, this does. And you were her musical director for what, 21 years?
Yeah, she's been in my life a long time.
Yeah.
No one in the world is nicer than she is.
And the one we were talking off air that could never call George Burns George. It was always Mr.
Absolutely.
Mr. Burns, yeah.
She referred to Jack Lemmon as Mr. Lemmon, and she did
Grumpy
She did
Old
Grumpy
Man
Old Man
and
Grumpy Old
did
Man,
the
you
whole
know. Yeah, she's
sequels
an
with it.
amazing lady, and so her husband is wonderful, Roger Smith.
Yes, 77 Sunsets.
Right. Yeah. They're a great couple. I mean, incredible.
In our remaining moments, of course, B.J. Ward again was another one of your wives. Real quickly, again, we'll have Donn on and cover so much more later on. But Nancy Wilson, you were with her for several years. Mm-hmm. Then this was culminating in the late '60s, early '70s.
I guess so.
You were replaced because there was some backlash. Talk about reverse discrimination, backlash because people took offense that she had a Caucasian musical director.
That's right. The
And
black
then-
press was not nice
Yeah.
about that.
Ebony Magazine was having a field day with you. Yeah, so yeah, there you go. 3 underrated singers that you've worked with.
Underrated. Well, I think BJ is one. Shaney
Okay.
Rainbow.
Yeah.
That's a very funny name.
Yeah.
Shaney Rainbow came into my life in kind of a strange way. My drummer on the Steve Allen show was playing in San Francisco, and I visited up there, and he said, I want you to come down. I'm doing a date at a theater with Shaney Rainbow, and why don't you come by? And I remember I was there with my young daughter, and they wouldn't let her sit. It wasn't a theater, it was a nightclub. And they wouldn't let her sit in there, so she sat in the sound booth. And after the show was over, my drummer, Tom Duckworth, introduced me to Shaney. And I said, Shaney Rainbow. I said, is Bill Rainbow? She said, that's my father. And he was a television director that I did the telethon, the Variety Club telethon, with my orchestra every year. And that was her dad, and so it was a really nice connection.
She's in the business too. Yeah, no, I'm familiar with her. Hope to have her on the show in the future. Yeah,
yes, you must.
Yeah,
she's wonderful.
Mid 90s, if I have or maybe early 90s. After many years, never had a child, adopted a child, and
she was with us 27 hours after she was born.
Wow.
And Carmen cut the
wife,
umbilical cord.
Wow.
It was a wonderful adoption.
Yeah.
And I spoke to her today on driving here.
Yeah.
I was going to tell Liz. Liz looks up things for me all the time. I said, I've never been to that neck of the woods. She'll look that up for me. What does neck of the woods mean? And Carmen is her mom. And she's been a joy.
And now she's
24 years old.
Yeah.
She's just graduated as a music major. Just got back from Graz, Austria, where she did a 6-week intense course in opera, German, performance, and music theory. And she's working as an audio apprentice at the Mohegan Sun, which is where Carmen works.
Yeah.
So they're together, which is great.
And you were not doing much as you did before with Mohegan, in other words, but you're
yes,
obviously
I still do.
Still do
I
on
still do
occasion,
dates
but
out there,
busy
yeah.
between obviously helping folks produce CDs and all sorts, and doing the Hartford Jazz Orchestra.
Well, I supply orchestras out there when they need me to do it.
Yeah.
Tony Orlando and Donn were there 2 months ago.
Yeah, I heard someone went to see that, a long-awaited reunion after, I don't know
Did you go
what.
see it?
No, someone, a coworker of mine
that was
went
my
to
orchestra.
see it. Nice. There you go. They
And
spoke
the
very
Golden
highly of it.
Boys come there every year, and that's wonderful. That's Bobby Rydell,
Frankie and
Frankie
and Fabian.
Avalon,
Yeah.
and Fabian.
There you go.
And they're just great, and it's a wonderful show.
Donn Trenner joining us for the remaining moments here on Studio 411. The book, Leave It to Me, My Life in Music, co-authored with Tim Atherton. Mid-90s, I guess one too many earthquakes. You decided, I want to move back to Connecticut. So it's
That was difficult.
So kind of nice that, the transition, I'm sure, is never easy when it's a move after being somewhere for so many years.
Yeah, but it's really something to go through, too.
Sure.
It's really hard to verbalize what an earthquake feels like. It's amazing.
That's like that old clip many years ago. Two that come to mind. One is an outtake of an old W.C. Fields shoot. They were filming a movie, I want to say 34. There was a famous earthquake that in the 30s that hit California.
1906, San Francisco.
Right, that was the early one, but this one was during the talking movies. And it's a clip, an outtake of Fields. All of a sudden, the earthquake starts, and he starts with the hat like, what? And things are falling all over, the booms and lights and everything. And they got it on film. I mean, you could actually see everything shake.
It's amazing. You just can't believe it.
And I think another one that I recall was actually a Tonight Show, I think, where they were actually either just beginning or in the middle of a taping, and all hell broke loose, and they, of course, they...
We're so totally dependent upon the floor or the sidewalk or what we walk on never moving.
Yeah. A famous, and I'm bad at quotation, but a famous comedian once said something about atheists. Well, when the ground shakes, they'll look up. So I said, okay.
Oh, that's funny.
I get it. Oh, tell me now, a critique about today's music, and I don't mean the music per se. I think you're more from a technical standpoint about, you know, how everything is canned music and synthesized music, electronic. In other words, you hark for a day, which a lot of folks financially don't want to do, to have, again, performances where there's full orchestras, where there's, you know, a real,
Sure.
not a couple of guys and the rest is all push button.
Well, I had a recording studio in California, and I did quite a bit of recording there. And when I moved back to Connecticut, the house that I bought had room enough for me to put a studio in. And I put a lot of money into that studio.
Sure.
And by the time it was almost ready to happen, everybody had a studio in their computer.
Yeah.
So I lost all that money, and it just was...
Even the way they now go around as a performance, they go around with a tablet and they make the adjustment. You still see, like at Mohegan, the big
Sure.
spread, but a lot of it now is being tweaked while a guy is walking around the stage. And I don't know, some of it I guess is high tech, or it is high tech, but I'm saying is probably producing a better sound. But I don't know, I'm still
You're
more of a
very
purist.
well informed, Larry. I don't mean, you know, I'm not trying to make you my best friend, but you do very well.
Yeah, I told you, a great cocktail party. I'm still waiting for the invitation from Mother Dolores to the convent there. But I don't know, me in a convent, I don't know. I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. Oh, my goodness. Now, I think we're winding down near the 1 minute. Okay, thank you. My cue person there. Real quick, nice picture of Donn and your daughter. Your daughter's first
Sarah.
name? Sarah, along with Tony Bennett. There you go. That's something. And we have, unfortunately, time has run out on the old hourglass, as they used to say. McDonald Carey used to say something like that. So the book, again, Leave It to Me, My Life in Music, by Donn Trenner with Tim Atherton. We definitely have to have Donn on because we only covered, I think, 2 wives. I don't even think we got to all the others. So, you know, so I hope Donn will grace us again. And we're going to have Donn, I hope, with some theme shows. Maybe we'll get a cavalcade of all his lady friends, the Shaney and who am I
Sylvia
forgetting?
Mims.
Sylvia.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Sylvia Mims, we've got a track from her album that she did. Donn co-produced it with Sylvia. Give me the name again.
Where Lovers Live.
Where Lovers Live, and that is the title track. And there it is on the screen, and we're going to hear that as we say goodbye to Donn. Hang in there with us. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of Studio 411. And we will have our friend Sylvia Mims perform a Donn Trenner composition.
And Larry, let me thank you very much. You're fun.
Absolutely.
You're a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I try my best. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye now.
Where lovers live, it's always right. It's cool by day and warm in the night. And in case it's not, you forgot to be lovers. Where lovers dwell, it's never wrong. The words and music of your song, the truth will tell. If that's a lie, goodbye, you're not in love. Da 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 da. What lovers seek, they're bound to find, as sure as hope is warm in the mind. For if not, my friend, you pretend to be lovers. For those who love, for those who dare, for those who need their lives to share, for those who care, I say no more. What for? For when you give, you found your place, the place where lovers live. What lovers seek, they're bound to find, as sure as hope is warm in the mind. For if not, my friend, you pretend to be lovers. For those who love, for those who dare, for those who need their life to share, for those who care, I say no more. What for? For when